Hello, I am Vladimir Shirogorov, a historian and author of the book War on the Eve of Nations, Conflicting Militaries in Eastern Europe, 1450–1500, and my next volume, Strategies of Ukrainian War, is in print now. I am also an author of multiple essays in English and Russian, published in Germany, Italy, the United States, Russia, and other countries. The current webinar is a part of my course, Competitive Strategy with Experience of the Military History. I will start to teach it in 2–3 weeks. Please follow my Telegram and YouTube channels. The current webinar is devoted to the Crimean War, the large international military events, the large and fierce confrontation in 1453–1456. The Crimean War is very important for our current understanding of our time in two different perspectives. The first perspective is understanding of the political and military events, like the current strike of Israel on the Iranian nuclear facilities. Studying the Crimean War, we could understand why the strike was committed to the nuclear facilities and not to the military installations of the Iranian regime or its oil pumping and oil refinery economic base. Why the technology was targeted today. And the second perspective of studying the Crimean War, very important perspective, is the current strategy of economic units and political parties. It's important for businessmen and politicians because it teaches to understand and use what is technological and industrial edge for competitive struggle. Now I discuss these two perspectives in detail. Subtitle of the current webinar is the military industrial edge as a strategy against empires. I start with the difference of strategies in the wars of the 20th and the 21st century. All different huge international conflicts in this period of time had different strategic pivot or strategic axis. If in the First World War the military forces, the armies and navies of the enemies were targeted, were attacked, in the Second World War the focus of the enemy assault was directed on the political regime, on the political structure, political cohesion of the enemy, and in the group of conflicts that are enveloping before our eyes today. The identity of the enemy is the principal target of the strike. What is the identity? What is this target? Identity of the enemy is cohesion of the principal social group, political elite, army, and leadership of the enemy state around the common values of the national existence. This cohesion is the principal might of the states. Not industrial might, not military might, not some abstract ideology, but this cohesion of identity is very important for ability to withstand the strike of the enemy and win in the confrontation. It seems that if transfer of the main point of the military activity from military forces of the enemy to its political structure is linked to development of industry, to the appearance of new means of armed struggle, such as tank forces, aviation, missiles, automatic weapons, and so on. And the move from targeting the enemy's political structure and its forces to targeting its identity, it seems it's linked to appearance of the new means of informational struggle. First of all, the social networks, social media that dominate in the distribution of information today. However, all of these strategies were first implemented, used in the Crimean War, and used not in chaotic way, but used in their logical continuity for achieving the objectives of the conflict, used to achieve the objectives of strategy. It is the reason why the Crimean War is especially interesting as a phenomenon of the international military conflict. The Crimean War became a seminal event from which different strategies of armed struggle, of military conflict, came to the wars of the 20th and 21st century. The Crimean War closed very long and exclusively long peaceful period in European history that started following collapse of great French conqueror emperor Napoleon Bonaparte. Following his collapse in 1815, there were 4 decades of peaceful existence in Europe, of peace between the European great powers, and only some local social rioting and colonial warfare disturbed the peaceful existence of Europe. Following the Crimean War, the avalanche of military conflicts drove to the catastrophic First World War. And in the First World War, 4 of 4 European empires collapsed. They were the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, German Empire, Ottoman Empire, and Russian Empire. All of them collapsed. And their collapse had the same features, the same picture. And this picture is really very manifesting and significant. The collapse of all 4 empires started from their military defeat in the struggle with the enemy, superior in industrial might and military and economic resources. Then the military defeat caused collapse of their political regime, and collapse of the political regime provoked upheaval of the peripheral, national and social groups that charged to create their own statehood. The similar picture of collapse of all 4 empires in the First World War tells that it was not accidental coincidence of the military and political events. It was a strategy applied, used by the enemies of the collapsed empires. First international military event in which this kind of strategy was applied was the Crimean War of 1853-1856. And the picture of collapse of these four empires in the First World War, during the First World War, in the result of the First World War, is similar and has very interesting and manifesting comparison. All the empires that collapsed looked not as a cohesive monolith body, but like onions, bulbs, consisting of scales that stick to each other around some core of empire. The strategy that was applied against the empires in course of the First World War was directed to rip off the scales of the imperial bulb, to expose their core under the strike. And it is the strategy that was invented and first applied in the Crimean War. This strategy, following the Crimean War, this strategy was widely used on the everyday basis of different composite states against each other. The same strategy was used not only in the First World War, but also in the Second World War by the Nazis against the Soviet Union and against the British Empire. And the same strategy was used by the West, led by the United States of America, against the Soviet Union in the Cold War. At the same time, in the Cold War, the Soviet Union used it against the colonial empires of the West, colonial empires of the European metropoles. And now the same strategy is used against the composite nations such as Russia, China, India, the United States of America, the European Union, and increasingly following the migration against the West European nation states. This strategy must be generalized as strategy and must be learned to understand the political reality, and at the same time it may be projected on the competitive struggle in the economy and party politics, and understanding of this strategy gives an opportunity to survive and win in this struggle. The case of the Crimean War is an example of my course, Competitive Strategy, Lessons of War, that I will start to teach in a few weeks. This course not only provides the theoretical understanding of strategy as a kind of thinking and a kind of action, it also instructs in strategic analysis, understanding of strategic factors, vision of the strategic scene, and catching the strategies of its actors. It's also provide the knowledges for strategic prognosis, strategic vigilance, and preparation of the students for the strategic rivalry. It is very important because only understanding strategy as legacy, heritage of the military science, of the military history, it's possible to apply it effectively in the competitive struggle. So, back to the Crimean War. The Crimean War was the first international conflict following the European Spring of Nations. The European Spring of Nations was a very important event, a chain of revolutions in Europe, in all European countries besides the Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire in 1448, 1449. It is very important because it crushed the existing European regimes linked to the feudal past and established the first frames of the nation states. The nation states are the creators of nationalism. That was a first fuel of the revolutionary wave in Europe, and nationalism started to play the leading part in the script of European future from the Spring of Nations, and nation states that emerged from the Spring of Nations became the main political structure of modernity, of the current time. It is a structure by which the humankind is organized now. The second important production of the Spring of Nations is populism. Populism as ability of the politicians to address the masses of population with different exciting theories like terrorism, communism, socialism, and so on. Since the European Spring of Nations, the combination of nationalism and populism determined the European and global history. Another interesting phenomenon of the Crimean War is its position as the first international conflict, first large international military conflict of the industrial epoch. It was the first period of time, the first war, when the acting armies and navies looked like projections of industrial technological capacity. Since the Crimean War, the industrial might, the technological might of the states determined their strategy, not only for large or great, but also for smaller nations. Together, nationalism and industrialization created the so-named Second Military Revolution. Second, because it followed the first gunpowder military revolution of the early modern period. It changed the modes of war, the nature of war, the techniques of fighting. All main components of warfare as a kind of social activity were drastically changed. Industrialization and nationalism are the stage of the civilizational development of the humankind. At the same time, in the Crimean War, they became the tools of strategy. And it is very important that it was the first time when industrial mind and nationalistic spirit were used to achieve the military objectives. Now you have on your screen a map of Europe, including adjacent regions such as North Africa and Ottoman Empire, and with the red line on this map is delineated very important region that lacked the attention of the analysts and historians, despite the fact that they had to pay it. It's the region of the Grand East European geopolitical Ukraine, or frontier, the region from Ural-Caspian Gates near the Caspian Sea to the Trojan Wall at the mouth of the river Danube. From the south, this region is limited by the northern shores of the Black Sea, Azov Sea, Caspian Sea and Caucasus mountain range. And at its north, it's limited by the natural border between northern and southern part of Eastern Europe that runs from the Carpathian Mountains via the Polesye, that is the great forest and marsh region, mostly in Belarus, to the rivers Desna and the river Aka in 100 kilometers south of Moscow. Then it runs along the river Kama to the Urals. South and north of Eastern Europe are different dramatically, and their main difference is not the natural conditions, while also they are very different, because northern part of Eastern Europe is hilly region of forest, and southern part is the region of forest steppe and steppe. But the political history of this region is of these two regions of Eastern Europe is very important. The northern part of Eastern Europe was the region of the old political centers. Russia or Muscovy, Lithuania, Poland had their historical political centers in the northern part of Eastern Europe. In the southern part of Eastern Europe, on the eve of the early modern period, there were nothing. It was semi-deserted wild field, vacated by the Mongolian super empire of the Golden Horde. On this territory, the three principal great powers of Eastern Europe that competed over domination or hegemony in the region clashed. They were Poland, Muscovy Russia and the Ottoman Empire. In the 16th, 17th and 18th century, Muscovy or Russian Empire obtained domination in this region, distracted its enemies and conquered its own. But it conquered this region not at once, but step by step. First it was Muscovite Ukraine in 600 kilometers south of the river Oka. Then it was the Russian Ukraine in another 600 kilometers south up to the shoreline of Azov Sea, Caspian Sea and the Caucasus Mountains. And in the second half of the 17th century, the territory of the Cossack Hetmanate, eastern part of the former Polish Ukraine, was annexed to the Russian Empire following the revolt of the Ukrainian Cossacks and their drive to unite with Muscovy. In the 18th century, Muscovy moved to the south out of the borders of the Cossack Hetmanate and conquered the Ottoman Black Sea coast, Black Sea steppes. The so famous centers as Odessa, Kherson, Nikolaev are located on this territory that Russia annexed from the Ottoman Empire. At the same time, Russia destroyed the Crimean Khanate and annexed its territory. At the end of the 18th century, in the Russian Empire, the decisive, profound administrative reform was accomplished. It introduced uniform arrangement, administrative, military, social arrangement over all empire, including its older northern territories and the new southern territories. But despite this reform, the Russian Empire remained similar to the imperial bulb, in which different scales, different territories that were absorbed by the Russian Empire slice after slice, they preserved their difference and their selfish thinking. And this structure of the Russian Empire as the imperial bulb is very important for understanding of the onion strategy against empires that was invented during the Crimean War. The Ottoman Empire that expanded in the 14th to 16th century was the similar onion-style body, but more soft, less integrated, less its scales of its imperial bulb were less adhesive. The reason for it was that during their conquest, the Turk Muslims did not integrate different peoples that they united in the empire into the one integrated body. They remained a minority even in the imperial core of the Ottoman Empire, which was Western Anatolia, Abyssinia and Thrace. It is the regions around the city of Istanbul now. And in these territories, the Christian minorities were majority. Christian minorities, as we name them, I don't know for what reason, because they were the majority in some, in the Ottoman Empire. First of all, they were the Greeks and the Armenians. And when Russia found this specific of the Ottoman Empire, revealed this nature of the Ottoman Empire as a composite onion-style state, it started to apply this understanding for developing the onion strategy against it. Until the end of the 18th century, Russia struggled with the Ottoman Empire head-on, wresting from it the southern half of Eastern Europe. Following the Napoleonic Wars, Russia started to apply the onion strategy, developing self-consciousness, ethnic consciousness, military forces, separate administrative arrangement, and rush for independent statehood of different peoples, of different scales of the Ottoman imperial bulb. First, it was the turn of the Serbs that came in contact with the Russian military forces and government during the Russian-Ottoman War in the 1810s. Then it was the turn of the Greeks, who started their war of independence in the 1820s. Then it was the turn of the Bulgarians, who demanded self-rule in the Ottoman Empire in the 1840s. At the same time, the similar development started to run in the Transcaucasia, where first Russians annexed from the Ottoman Empire and partly from Iran, the different Georgian states until the 1830s, and then started to annex the territories with Armenian population, and arranged in 1930 the Armenian province. That was maybe the first Armenian self-ruling proto-state since the defeat of the Byzantine and Armenian army by the Turk Seljuks in 1071 at Matsiker. So the Russians started to explore the same situation and act according to the same onion strategy both in the Balkans and Transcaucasia and Northern Anatolia, slowly moving to the central core of the Ottoman Empire, where they started to promote self-consciousness and rush for independent existence among the Armenian and Greek communities. It was a great move that really endangered the Ottoman Empire, and Ottomans understood this move, and how they acted I will tell a few minutes later. Now it's important to understand how the onion strategy against the Ottoman Empire interacted with the conservative approach of Russia to the European affairs after the Napoleonic Wars. Russia was one of the founders of the so-named European concept or Vienna system of the states, when the Holy Alliance of Prussia, Russia and Austrian Empire worked together with two other great powers of Europe, France and Britain, to preserve the current boundaries and political regimes in Europe, if need by military means. This system was a foundation of the European peace, and Russia was committed to it. At the same time, Russia developed the onion strategy against the Ottoman Empire, feeding the nationalistic ambitions of its different social and political groups. Then, in the plan of Russia was to bring two situations together and present the Ottoman Empire in its heaviest crisis, ready to fall out, to be distributed between the European great powers. It is the Russian strategy behind the so-named Eastern question, and it was the Russian strategy behind a proverbial definition of the Ottoman Empire as the weak man of Europe that Russian Tsar Nicholas I advanced. What happened in the Ottoman Empire in this period? In the Ottoman Empire, despite almost 200 years of uninterrupted defeats and civil war between different social classes of the Ottoman society, first of all between the basic Turkish Muslim class of the commoners and upper class of the Ottomans, despite the military defeats and the civil war, the Ottoman Empire did not came to any unity, to any integration. Vice versa. From the beginning of the 19th century, a new line of disintegration appeared in the Ottoman Empire. It was division between the Turkic officialdom and the military class that was recruited among the Muslim Turks and non-Ottoman, non-Muslim, non-Turkic, mainly Christian and Jewish commercial class. The Turkish class that imagined itself being the owner of the Ottoman Empire, suspected the Christian and Jewish commercial class in the intention to destroy the Ottoman Empire and establish their own nation states on its debris. And I see that this suspicion was right. It was the new line of split inside the Ottoman Empire that the Russians decided to use. It was a reason why the Russians advanced their ultimatum to the Ottoman Empire in 1853, requesting to accept the Russian protection over the Christian subjects of the Ottoman Empire that really could turn them into the double subjects of the Russian Emperor and the Turkish Sultan. This move is comparable with the current strategy of issuing the second passport, second citizenship to the population of the territories in discussion between different states. And it would work in the same way in the 1850s. It was the reason why the Ottomans, understanding the danger of this move, rejected the Russian ultimatum. The Russians occupied the new principalities Wallachia and Moldavia, that is Romania now, pursuing to press the Ottoman to accept the ultimatum. But the Ottomans moved against Russians and declared war on them. Now it was the turn of Britain and France to choose two different ways. First way is to press the Ottomans, that the Ottomans accepted the Russian ultimatum and preserve the international peace. And the second move was to support the Ottomans and destroy the hegemony of Russia in the Black Sea region and weaken Russia as their global contender. Their choice was determined by the industrial development in England and France. It was very fast in the first half of the 19th century, and two very important features of this industrial development it's necessary to understand for studying of strategy. Not only the new social class of the businessmen and financial moguls emerged in Britain and France that entered the politics and started to control it. At the same time, the industrial facilities in which they received their wealth produced the advanced means of army struggle, advanced weapons. Between the advanced weapons that appeared in the booming industrialization of England and France were the steamer ships with screw propulsions, rifled long-range heavy artillery, munition, shell munition, high explosives, rifle handguns with the conic bullets. Britain and France were leading in this development and were ahead in this development for maybe a decade or a decade and a half ahead of Russia, ahead of Austria, Prussia and other great European states. Together, France and Britain started to use superiority of these new arms for their profiteering And first of all, they started to use it in their colonial ventures. Algeria in conquering France in conquering Algeria, Britain in conquering India, and together in marauding China. At the same time, they understood that they have this superiority not only for colonial warfare, but also for European situation, and they could use it to change the political domination of the Holy Alliance of Russia, Prussia and Austria in Europe, change to their English and French dominance. Increasingly, while remaining competitors, Britain and France started to cooperate to achieve their common goals against the Holy Alliance, and first of all against Russia, because Russia became their global contender in Eurasia, in the wide strip of Eurasia, from the Balkans through Iran, Ottoman Empire, Central Asia, to the South Asia of Far East. It was the giant region of competition, and France and Britain understood that they could win this competition only weakening or destroying the core of Russian power, which was the European part of Russian Empire, its metropolitan political structure and military potential. So they preferred to use the Black Sea crisis to challenge the core potential of Russian Empire, its political structures. And there were two parties in British and French elites. The French elite, which was represented by Louis Napoleon, who declared himself Emperor Napoleon III in 1452, and his closest accomplice, Duke de Persigny. They strove to root the foundation of their Bonapartist regime using the victory over Russia in the oncoming war. In Britain, there was a party of Prime Minister Aberdeen, who tried to preserve the European concept and balance in Europe, and party of Home Secretary and former Foreign Secretary Lord Palmerston, who preferred direct attack on Russia to destroy the Russian political stability and military potential. Among the accomplices of Palmerston, there were a lot of outstanding military figures. In 1853, Palmerston created a parallel government in Britain that was named a Committee for National Defense. And he enlisted in this Committee of National Defense the First Lord of Admiralty, Graham, Secretary at War, Herbert, and most important figures of the British military establishment, Commander-in-Chief of Army, Chief of Ordnance, and Chief of Fortification. They were the people responsible for development and application of the advanced technical means of military struggle. So Palmerston caught a course of the development of the key military competence that could be used against Russia. Between these persons, Herbert was maybe the most interesting figure, because Herbert was nephew of Vorontsov, and Vorontsov was between two principal military advisors of the Russian Emperor Nicholas I. So they used partly same or similar source of information for their strategical conclusions. And Herbert made very important dynamic strategical conclusion about balance of power between Britain and France on one side and Russia on another side. And he analyzed the industrial capacity and fighting potential of the Russian Empire and Britain and France. And he found that the Russian military, as it was not critically weak or critically outdated. The main Russian weaponry was only 5-7 years older than the main weaponry of the British and French military. The Russian backwardness was narrowed in the very small circle of military technologies. They were screw-propelled steamers, rifled long-range artillery, rifled handguns with conic bullets, high explosive and shell munition. How this superiority in this narrow field would influence the large conflict was unclear, because it was a new weapon, never used in the really large military conflict. However, for Herbert, who was secretary at war, it was clear that this kind of weapons, this kind of narrow technical superiority provides the military domination in the small areas of amphibious struggle, in the littorals, where the steamers with their all-weather mobility and ability to move, to be agile, the on-board long-range artillery, heavy artillery, shell munition and high explosive gives the decisive superiority over the enemy, and where the landing infantry equipped with the rifled handguns would be superior over the enemy infantry, over the Russian infantry equipped with the smoothbore handguns. Only in these small areas of amphibious warfare, only in littorals, the French and British militaries commanded undisputable superiority over the Russians. But there were another dynamics. The problem was that Russian army would spend a large amount of arms and munition in the large military confrontation. But Russia had weak industry that did not cope to replace it with modern equipment. And Russia would start to equip its arms, to supply its troops from the stock. And this was the stock technically on the level of the period of Napoleonic wars or earlier period. It means that the technical superiority of the British and French armies that relied on much more developed industry than Russia had would increase, and Russian ability to resist the assault of France and Britain would decrease. And Herbert proposed Palmerston to build the strategy against Russia on this ability. It means that the Russian industrial and urban centers in the littorals must be attacked, administrative centers must be attacked. However, Palmerston had developed an idea how to convert the fighting superiority in the strips along the sea littorals into the strategic superiority in war. First of all, the Allies, Britain and France, during the Black Sea crisis, chose the objectives for their attacks. It was not only Sebastopol in Crimea that was a central point for control over the Black Sea and its littoral region, but also other Russian administrative and military centers along Black Sea coast. And among them there were the famous today cities such as Odessa, Nikolaev, Kherson, Azov and Rostov. Besides choosing these littoral centers of the Russian power for their attack, Palmerston generated the idea to use penetration inside the Russian mainland along the main avenue rivers of south of Eastern Europe, such as the Dniester, the Dnieper, the Southern Bug and the Don, to provoke upheaval of the different social and national groups that populated this territory against the central structures of Russian Empire and destroy the Russian Empire as an onion in the same way like Russia intended to destroy the Ottoman Empire. This reverse was the great revelation of Palmerston, and it was the great revelation first of all due to the fact that he used as a leverage to provoke fallout of the scales of the Russian imperial bulk by the industrial military superiority of the British and French armies and navies in the littoral amphibious warfare. This connection of the military industrial factor and strategy to destroy much bigger state, provoking the domino effect inside its political structure, was really a great revelation, and it was used later frequently by different enemies against different composite states. This strategy of Palmerston teaches us to understand the play of technological and industrial factors of the new technologies, new organization and new products in the competitive struggle, not only between the nation states on the level of great politics and grand strategy, but also on a level of competitive struggle between enterprises, companies and political parties. Because now it is very important, because now the competitive struggle is increasingly determined by the introduction of new technologies, and to use the new technologies as a superiority for the competitive struggle and understanding means of defense against the superior technologies of the enemy in competition is very important for successful achieving the strategies. Now I explain you how the structure of this short free webinar course will unfold. Following this webinar in the current month, I place on my channel with YouTube and Telegram a series of shorts in which I explain with the examples of how the technology, the industrial age worked in the Crimean War with the link to situations and examples how the technological and industrial age works in the current competitive and political struggle. And then, following this month of studying the technologies, technological and industrial effect of military struggle in detail, I come to the next webinar in which I explain in what means and for what measure this strategy was used by Britain and France against Russia in the Crimean War, and what was its strategic results. I am Vladimir Shirogorov, historian, author of the book War on the Eve of Nations, Conflict with Militaries in Eastern Europe, 1450-1500, and Strategies of Ukrainian War, 1500-1800, that is now in print. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and my channel with Telegram. Buy my books, and I will be glad to meet you again. Goodbye.